Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Blockade on Iranian ports around the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump overnight on Truth Social said, quote, the United States to blockade ships entering or exiting Iranian ports on April 13th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, the Iranian military is warning that no Gulf ports will be safe if their own ports are threatened. We understand there are a variety of contingencies in place, and U.S. Central Command says that humanitarian vessels and regular commercial ships not coming from Iran will be allowed to use the Strait of Hormuz. CENTCOM releasing a statement of their own this weekend saying the blockade will be enforced impartially against vessels of all nations entering or departing Iranian ports and coastal areas, including all Iranian ports on the Arabian Gulf and Gulf of Oman. CENTCOM forces will not impede freedom of navigation for vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz to and from non-Iranian ports. President Trump this weekend speaking about the situation, saying this.
Other nations are working so that Iran will not be able to sell oil, and that will be very effective. But what we want to do is we want to, and again, we don't need it. What we noticed and what we see and what I think is maybe my idea, maybe not, I don't know. But there are many boats heading toward our country to fill up with oil and then go and take it. So they're not going to go through the Hormuz Strait. And ultimately that'll be corrected.
With a focus on Iran, there's also a focus on Lebanon, where
Good afternoon, my fellow Americans, and welcome back to More War Monday on the Rob Maness Show. We're live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Friends, that powerful blockade footage you just saw paints a crystal clear picture of how tense things are right now, not just in the Middle East, but spreading around the world. These ceasefire talks have stalled, obviously. Pressure's mounting between Israel and Iran because of Lebanon and their proxy forces. The IRGC and besieged forces remain on high alert and are, of course, suppressing their population, while NATO and the French guy, Macron, are all dithering or stirring up the pot where they shouldn't be, while President Trump is not just weighing every next move, but precisely making those moves to get to our desired outcome. And in the middle of all that chaos, something truly remarkable did happen a few days ago, and it reminded the entire world of who we are. America executed a daring high-risk rescue and recovered 2 F-15E crew members isolated behind enemy lines in Iran. The world watched, fascinated, as our forces proved once again that no one left behind isn't just words. It's a promise that we keep. It was a flawless personnel recovery operation from many perspectives that showed our all-volunteer force exactly why they can trust the chain of command, and it sent an unmistakable message to every adversary. We are capable, we are willing, and we are unmatched. And I'll break all of this down with unmatched authority is my guest today, senior geopolitical strategist, drone expert, author, and retired lieutenant colonel and Army helicopter pilot, Darren Gobb. And he's world famous on Fox News and Newsmax quite a bit because I see him like 2 times a day now. Darren, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show.
To join you again. It's been a bit, but sometimes in all the noise, it's great to be able to look at and tell the good stories that are happening too, because they're there. You just got to look harder.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I see this before we dive into the rescue piece of it, of which you have a very deep understanding of combat search and rescue from a planning and execution perspective, and you've spent probably total of years and years in Middle East combat zones at this point in your life. So you could probably do this in your sleep, how effective they were and everything. But this, the talk stalling, which really didn't surprise me much because the Iranians, I mean, they even have it written in their constitution that they need to kill non-believers in order to bring back the 12th Imam type thing. So I'm not surprised that they're not going to give up their nukes, especially without fight. But the blockade piece, I actually see that as a good news story about this operation because that's probably the most effective way and fastest way to cut off the pay of the troops inside the country, and that's what's going to cause the instability that makes them fall.
Yeah, in fact, probably three weeks ago or more, I started talking briefly about how blockading their ability to move ships out would be a much more advantageous move than it would be to try to see if we could put Marines or 82nd Airborne on Hormuz Island or Karg Island or any of that. Last thing we want to do is put American service members in a fixed position close to Iran, and then you have to guard them. It makes them an easy target. So, what is the real goal of trying to occupy Karg Island or Hormuz Island or any of that? It's all about the strait. And so rather than, put our people at much greater risk in an area where they don't need to be, take away the profit incentive, take away the easy transit incentive, and then suddenly you've achieved the same thing, but left our forces mobile, shipboard, rather than sitting there waiting for drones and missiles from Iran, those few that are left, to get launched up against those locations. So to me, I think this is a good move. I think the logistics and how this is all going to work out may somewhat still be in play as we discover and learn from it. But part of me also says, it reminds me of how the War of 1812 started in history. It's all about maritime trade in some respects. So fascinating to watch as a historian, as a tactician, as a geopolitical guy. But I think this is a good move in the end, much better than the other option.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the history part of this. I don't think a lot of Americans walking around today understand that what we're doing now from a maritime perspective, is a traditional mission all the way back to the first president of the United States, and the third. I think Jefferson was number 3, wasn't he? The third president of the United States actually went to war with Islamist Barbary pirates for the first time by sending the Marines over. And the USS Constitution and the small fleet we had at the time. And it was all about freedom of navigation and freedom for trade on international waterways, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a Mediterranean-based mission, and it worked. Much bigger body of water than the Persian Gulf, or as we say now, the Arabian Gulf. Shows you who your friends are, is which words you use there. But this is not new. I mean, we're not inventing something here. We're using tactics, frankly, that the Navy trains on. So this is how we would do it if we had to do it. And all the noise in different news agencies about how Trump didn't account for this, or the Department of War didn't account for this in their planning. I'm like, they did. I guarantee you, because I'm sure that you and I have both watched over some of the same operational plans and contingency work. Blocking the strait, mining the strait, using the Navy and threatening it was number one of what Iran would do in order to gain leverage. And that's always been true. So there's no way they ignored it. It's not possible that they didn't know it. And I think that's just part of the cycle of media. We move too fast to think sometimes.
Yeah. Here's a question for you. Has anybody seen a sea mine in the Strait of Hormuz yet?
Only in cartoon graphics. Yeah. That's the psychology part. We're going to mine it. Well, we can't prove they didn't, so we're going to not take the risk. Well, there may not be a single thing out there, but as long as they think there could be, we're just going to freeze all movement and never be the first.
Now, on a serious note, it's been leaked out now that we have surface and subsurface counter mine capability now that are automated, unmanned. And those kind of things. Remember all the screeching about, the four minesweepers are being decommissioned in 2027. All of that screeching a few weeks ago. And so what I wanted to ask you is our Navy ready for this at this point? I mean, we've been doing a lot of downsizing and rearranging things, and Trump just is forcing a new battleship, which is exactly what this type of activity is intended to do, is to hold a choke point and keep the adversary away from it. But do you think, from a capability perspective, are we in a good position right now?
No, ultimately, I think we are, yes. And it's not just this one, of course. You've got over in the Suez as well. So you can open up one and block the other, and you still have somewhat the same problem. Asia is less concerned, of course, because they don't use the Suez, or as much, anyways. But I think our Navy's perfectly capable of doing this. It's a perfectly good scale of operation, I guess, is the easiest way to put it. If you go into is our Navy ready for something the size of a full mass force, use of the entire Chinese Navy or something, that's a different equation. But we're not dealing with that equation here. And what I think China's seeing, though, is that we're capable of a lot more than they ever assumed we were. So I'm eminently confident in our Navy's capability to handle things there. And of course, we never decommission something without having something to replace it. So those screechers, well, in the autonomous and drone world, what they should be thrilled about the fact that we're not risking human lives to go in there and clean out mines if they're even there in the first place.
Yeah, exactly right. I don't think they had a chance to lay any, to be honest with you, but I could be wrong. So one of the other things I wanted to ask you about is we hear a lot of negative narrative about our Gulf Arab state allies and friends, about their capability, their willingness to fight. But I'll be honest with you, Darren, I want to get your take on it, because I'm not getting that take in my observations of what the leadership of the Gulf Arab states are saying, especially since they've been attacked. I mean, it sounds like they're all in to help with all of their capabilities, and they do have some significant naval capability, right?
Yeah, I think we underestimate them in many respects. And frankly, I told a friend this morning, I said, after the Hungarian election, it's pretty sad that we probably have stronger allies in the Middle East right now than we do in Europe, or much of Europe. And that's a pretty sad testament. So it's the other thing that I think a lot of people are assuming when they say stuff like that is that the Gulf Arab states didn't want to get involved early. They might have wanted to. Saudi Arabia has always been an adversary to Iran. It's not just the Sunni Shia divide. It's just the normal stratagems going on between two nations who both want to be the power player there. And so they're very capable. We've sold them quite a bit of our stuff, minus, of course, certain systems on the aircraft, but they have it. I wouldn't be surprised if we asked them to stand down and just defend their nations and not get involved, because if you start mixing too many nations, as you start going from the complications of an American joint fighting world, add in the Israelites, and then so that adds one layer of complication. But if you were to throw in, Bahrain, UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and other nations, you could create a bigger risk to our own forces through their involvement, rather than just saying, hey, you know what, defend your nations for now, and we'll call you when we think it's time for you to help. They're there and they're ready. I guarantee it. This is in their best interest too.
Oh yeah. As a matter of fact, the Iranians have been hitting their energy infrastructure, and I think they've taken a couple of shots at the desalination plants, but they haven't really focused on them. But they say they're threatening that quite a bit. So, doing the missile defense and counter-air defense operations is key, and they've got Patriots and THAAD in support, plus their fighters have become pretty good at shooting down these little Shahed drones that the Iranians like to use, and those kind of things. So we got to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about the red line that we put in front of the Iranians about the no nukes thing. And I want to start moving into this rescue operation and about its impact on the minds of the adversary. I think that's important, and Darren is an expert in that area. We'll be right back with retired Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb, author and strategist.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work, try to see a doctor this week, or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Go to worldviewhealthcare.com. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. worldviewhealthcare.com. That's worldviewhealthcare.com.
The emergency kit available at worldviewhealthcare.com. Make sure you don't have to go to urgent care. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to go. I took this last year. Stayed at home. Went to bed.
Well, we're going to be blockading. It'll take a little while, but it'll be effective pretty soon. And we had meetings yesterday. They, as you said, lasted 21 hours. That was a long meeting. We had some very, very good representatives, as you know, JD and Steve and Jared. So we were well represented, but we didn't get there on the important issue. They want to have nuclear weapons. They're not going to have nuclear weapons. I've been saying that for 30 years. I would never allow that to happen before I was in politics. And that country will not have nuclear weapons. Most countries shouldn't be allowed to have, but that country will not have nuclear weapons.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and we're live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. And that's the red line. The Iranian Islamist government cannot have nuclear weapons. And President Trump was saying there, that was just 24 hours ago or so on Sunday morning Eastern time yesterday. He said it again. They cannot be allowed to have it. But as researching this show, I went back and when you look at all the clips between J.D. Vance, President Trump, and Mr. Trump, when he was a real estate construction mogul kind of guy 30 plus years ago, he wasn't kidding. He's been saying it for over 30 years that the Iranian government, as it currently is constituted, can never be allowed to have nuclear weapons because they intend to use them. And my guest today is retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb, and he is a former helicopter pilot, understands combat search and rescue, and we've kind of talked a little bit about the rescue operation that happened. But Darren, you know, these guys, this is the first point about the rescue operation I want to bring into this discussion. The red line is clear. The objective is clear. It's always been clear. No nukes for the Iranians from the United States of America. But the message that our operation to pick up those two F-15E aviators the other day by creating an airfield and operating from it and operating deep inside Iranian territory at will, quite honestly. It wasn't free. I mean, we got attacked and fought back, and our guys whooped them and everything. But that message says what? To not just the Iranians, but countries like China who are helping them militarily.
Yeah, and we lost some equipment too, but small price to pay for what you cannot replace, the lives of the pilots. And, you know, one of the key messages is the fact that is the treatment that people get when they're isolated on the battlefield from us. It's not because they're F-15 pilots. It's because they're American service members on the ground isolated. And it doesn't matter whether you're special operations, aviators, and whatever other branch or service might be involved in such a situation. We're going to come after them. And we're going to make sure that phrase, leave no one behind, isn't just a phrase and it stops there. We're going to put everything against it that we possibly can. And part of my background is not only training people as, you know, to have them survive in behind the lines combat environments and survival and evasion, the famous SEER phrase, that everybody focuses on that. But this demonstrated a little taste of the fact that there is a giant personnel recovery system that covers everything from the individual all the way out to satellites to other government agencies like the CIA, since they, told on themselves in this case that they were involved. And I've been to school where we go through those kinds of things with these agencies and trained with A-10 Sandy pilots who are trained in personal recovery tasks. I've done that myself in live fire situations. What is the message? Well, first of all, this is a combat mission. It's a highly complex and dangerous, risky combat mission. And we executed it flawlessly? No. But to the point of a level of expertise where anybody who's watching us knows that we're, one, going to come after our own, no matter what it takes. And two, this kind of mission and its complexity can be executed by us anytime, anywhere we want to. And we will level whatever assets are necessary to make sure that that happens. What's the opposite? We basically ripped the scab off of Afghanistan 2021 and showed the world that we have something quite different to show them now versus what we showed them then. And that capability resides. And that's why you need to have a good commander-in-chief and a good Department of War and in a top-notch military. You're not going to have a top-notch military, by the way, if you don't fulfill the promise of going to get people who are isolated, because they're going to realize that we don't keep our promises and not join in the first place.
Yeah, and that flows even down into if they are captured and under interrogations and those kind of things. If in the minds of the service members, and we've both been one of those people, if there's a wavering of that thought that somebody's going to come and get me, it makes you more susceptible to falling prey to interrogation techniques that everybody eventually, when they put enough pressure on you physically and mentally, eventually talks. But the longer you can hold out, the more distance you put between the information you have and it's stale. When you were talking about current ops, that's the whole idea behind that. But if our minds are wondering whether somebody's going to come get me, I think I would be weaker in that effort to try to stay strong as long as possible in an interrogation environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I wrote in my latest Substack too about leave no one behind. I think a lot of people get so focused on looking at that one pilot in an evasion situation behind enemy lines that they really don't have any idea of the entire system and the architecture that goes into a recovery mission like that. And so I, in an unclassified environment, of course, painted the picture the best I could. And if you read it, you'd know that there's a whole lot more you could say, but you can't. So you can only share so much. And it's important Americans, mothers, fathers, future service members, at least see a slice of that and know everything it means. And, this is done under the Joint Personnel Recovery Agency. There's a Joint Personnel Recovery Center in every major theater. And that's not only in combat zones. I mean, we've had people that have gotten onto the wrong airplane somehow and ended up in Tehran. And this has been some years ago. But that can be an isolating incident, and that those trained people come in to make sure that kind of thing happens. And if they think we ever really truly forget about people who go missing, well, to this day, there's an agency in the Pentagon that still goes to places like Vietnam and Korea and other battlefields and tries to recover the remains of America's fallen to repatriate them back home. Those missions occur. Sometimes they're successful. They do come back home. They don't get the media attention, but that doesn't mean that we stop. The media attention is irrelevant. That's just the mission, so that's what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that in the enemy's mind, the direct enemy, the Iranian government and their military leadership, that this ability to set down anywhere we want and operate from an airfield at will like this gives them pause from other perspectives of how they're fighting this war and trying to protect things like their nuclear material, their enriched uranium, which was not that far away from this area. That's my understanding.
Yeah. In a rational mind, you would think that they absolutely would. And you can debate whether or not they're rational people or not. But it's not just this mission, by the way. It's also what we did with Maduro in Venezuela. We'll find you, we'll target you, we'll lay our assets on top of it, and we will come and get you. We did that with the Iranian and IRGC leadership at the beginning of this conflict by eliminating them in a heartbeat. What's the difference, and why might they not worry about this too much? Well, unfortunately, you've got a whole group of people who have the messianic zeal, and they think a religious mission to destroy the Western world, specifically Israel and Iran. And so dying in that cause is okay with them. Surrendering is not. And that's kind of critical to their mindset. And so if they're seeking purely a military political victory, they're going to look at what we did, and they would normally say, wow, okay, we need to account for this in negotiations and in other areas. But if their mindset remains the ideological passion that has driven them for 47 years, from an Islamist standpoint, they may not care as long as they keep us engaged and keep telling their people they're gonna win, because most of their messaging is to their own population. It's not to us.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of us were being interviewed about this rescue operation, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but tell folks why it's so important for us not to reveal what we've been trained on to a level of detail that where it could harm the folks that are actually out there evading or trying to survive.
Yeah. Well, and you're familiar with this, before every mission that you take off on, there's a specific plan in place for how you are going to operate, move, navigate, whatever it may be, where you're going to go. You're carrying things with you that will help you with that. There's means of communication, and not only because you're going to flip open a radio and start talking about where you are. It's how you send people where you are, how you confirm that you are who you say you are, and you're not someone who ran across the radio and maybe trying to set a trap. And essentially, the whole thing comes down to, if this is done wrong, the person in isolation is put at great risk. The recovering forces are put at great risk because it could be a trap. And this is these techniques and means of how we do this could become widely known amongst people who shouldn't know anything about it. There are many things that are enciphered and coded in a variety of ways that just cannot be out there because it puts everybody at a great state of risk when they shouldn't be. It's important to Americans and those who come in to know that these systems exist, and they exist at every level of command throughout the military, and there are people trained on it and know how to do it. It's very specialized. People like me spent years becoming very specialized in this arena, and only by doing that do you realize that if the number of everything that's total about the personnel recovery mission equals 100, you can only share about 10% of it, because the rest of it needs to be highly protected for a reason. And that's about the life of everybody involved.
Yeah, it's very dangerous to reveal the information that shouldn't be revealed, because they're always looking. The bad guys are looking. I mean, we saw in the evolution of this rescue how the Iranians they started pushing forces up the roads in their trucks, the besieged forces, recruiting volunteers, and eventually gave a reward out so the local population would be energized to go find the guy.
Yeah, and this is all part of the reason why, and why also, anytime you start talking about doing these kinds of missions, you always want to have some sort of a deception plan. That was used in this case as well, very well, and it was very well done. Not only through the Central Intelligence Agency with the part they did reveal, but us moving other forces to a location to make it look like we were operating somewhere else that we weren't. These things are important, and it's all about successful mission execution, force protection, and bringing people back home alive. And in the end, there were things that went wrong. We lost equipment and there's an entire recovery process too, by the way, where they'll talk to both pilots. They'll learn about everything from their flight envelopes to what the threat was, how they acted on the ground, you name it, all those different parts and pieces. You'll find they did something wrong. There's no way not to. But those lessons will be incorporated into that general community about what happened. Happened with Scott O'Grady, and he did more wrong than he did right. But there's only one measure that matters. The only measure that matters is that you come home.
I'll never forget the picture of him carrying his sidearm, running to the guys that came to get him. The Americans were coming to get him on the ground, and that was a very surprising photo. We got to take another break there. When we come back, I want to dive into this operation from a sequence of events perspective, and talk people through how the situation develops in and of itself, and what the machinery starts doing without giving the wrong stuff away. Obviously, we'll be right back with Darren God.
This is from the Iranian state media. This is from X via Fox News. This, as we continue to follow the very latest, as we do know that a U.S. service member was rescued after Iran shot down their jet. So U.S. Special Forces rescued a downed airman in Iran in a very complex operation that averted a potential crisis as the war entered its sixth week, with few signs of progress in diplomatic efforts for a resolution. President Trump announcing the rescue in the early hours today in a social media post that described the operation in a mountainous area of Iran as, quote, one of the most daring search and rescue operations in U.S. history. The airman, a weapons officer of an F-15 jet, was shot down on Friday. He was wounded, but will be just fine. That's according to the president in a message on X posted by Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. Now, the pilot of that aircraft was rescued on Friday. A U.S. official said the operation, which Israel said it has assisted, involved dozens of military aircraft and encountered fierce resistance from Iranian forces. Iran's military said several U.S. aircraft were destroyed during the operation, including 2 military transport planes and 2 Black Hawk helicopters. Footage posted on social media showed burned out aircraft wreckage, which Reuters verified was in the area. A U.S. official told Reuters U.S. forces had to destroy at least one of the aircraft used in the rescue mission because it had malfunctioned. The Wall Street Journal reported that 2 specifically equipped MC-130Js aircrafts were used to carry out covert infiltrations and remove troops from beyond enemy lines, and those were blown up by U.S. forces after malfunctioning. A senior administrator in Washington said the rescue had involved a CIA deception campaign, spreading word inside Iran that U.S. forces had already found the missing airman and were moving him on the ground for exfiltration out of the country.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and we're talking about Iran and the current situation, and going over this rescue operation with an expert in the field, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb, who's also a helicopter pilot, an author of a great book, and you see him on Fox News. He's becoming world famous by appearing on Fox and Newsmax multiple times a day now, it seems. That my friends call it out to me when Darren's on. And Darren, welcome back. You know, the seriousness of the little clip there that I picked went through the sequence of events a little bit, but it also highlighted the seriousness of protecting information. One of the things that they talk about in that clip is the fact that pilot, the first guy, was picked up Friday morning, but the Iranians didn't know that, and the president complained after the fact that somebody leaked that we had the one guy but didn't have the other, and that helped the Iranians try to get him.
Oh yeah, and when that kind of thing happens, of course, first of all, you want whoever the person was, regardless of whether they think they were right or not, doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Leaking information from a classified environment and should be handled appropriately, to say the least.
Yeah.
And it's because they're sitting back in a base in the United States and their life isn't at risk. So they're trying to, I don't know what they're trying to do. It could just be straight up treason. And again, you handle that kind of thing appropriately as well.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
When there comes a time when, rather than try to control the flow of information in certain ways, what you do is you overwhelm the system with information more and more of, to create that kind of deception that everybody heard about publicly, that happened in Iran. There's more to that, of course, than what went on in the press, and that's as it should be. Mm-hmm. But sometimes the best thing to do is make it more confusing when you know that you're the ones who are executing the mission in the first place and know exactly what the truth is. So regardless of the timing of that leak, just flood the system with more, and then that'll just confuse them more, and that works to your advantage also.
Absolutely, and that was probably a serial event based on what they saw happening, and it's what's called a planned serial, where you have different avenues of execution possibilities, and you've planned them out and everything, so you at least have the basics together. Because every one of these situations is an ad hoc event, but it's not an ad hoc operation because of the planning, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you were to build a foundation that's square and not made out of concrete, those foundations are going to look very similar to each other, right? But there's a house that gets built on top based on the needs of the consumer. In this case, that consumer is the situation that surrounds the isolated person, and the people who are involved in missions like this, from special operations of various branches to the PAVE Hawk pilots, maybe even PAVE Low, depending, and the pararescuemen who go in, who are medically trained, but also air crew members, to what we would call outer cordons and these concentric rings that lead out different layers of security. You're going to get to the point where they may or may not be as expertly trained in personnel recovery, but everybody there is still highly trained, because you're going to use all these special operations forces all in one distinct place, and the location will drive the tactics. Specifically, the general tactics are there and they're trained on, and I've done it many, many, many times. But a ridgeline in Iran is different than a house in Iraq, is different than a cave in Afghanistan, and on and on. So you have to be super flexible with these missions and provide yourself the maximum amount of redundancy that you can, and that's what they did here. They had many different branches and sequels and various things going on, ready to execute as things revealed themselves. There's no perfect plan, and this is one of the most dynamic environments and most dynamic missions imaginable. You got to have some pretty flexible people who are highly trained and skilled to do this. That's exactly why we go through the training that we do for years. I did it for many years in the hopes that you never have to execute it. And if you only have to execute it once, it's worth it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as a former commander of a combat bomber squadron and commander of other troops that were sent into combat, the initial SERI, survival, evasion, rescue, or resistance and escape training is really good. I mean, I still remember it to this day. Sometimes I even, when I have dreams, I dream about that to this day. And I was a very young lieutenant, second lieutenant when I did mine. But we also build on that every year by more training, both academic and hands-on. So you're building a mental and physical muscle memory, right? Because I would be willing to bet that the Wizzo, who it's been reported was a colonel, which means probably in their 40s, was surprised to be headed up a ridge line to try to evade and hole up somewhere so he could get in touch with rescue forces. That he was doing that, and I bet he had a good running regimen even at his age, because I know I did. I was 40 something when I retired, and my last day I ran 3 miles in formation with my troops. So the cardio is important, right? But
Yep.
Describe what we talk to people about, and you've been through it yourself, but and people have heard me talk about it, but talk about it from your perspective. When you go from a nice warm cockpit, kicking butt in combat to, oh shoot, I'm dropping in behind enemy territory. What's next? What do we teach people to get their mind right and how to do that? The techniques that we do that, the ones you could talk about.
Well, you just said the first thing, and there's probably 3 critical things that it takes to survive. And first of all, it's the mindset. And that mindset leads to the desire to survive, the desire to evade and be recovered. And if you keep the right mindset, everything else will fall into place, even if it's imperfect. Second one being, you've got to have a functioning radio or a communication device that works. That's your tether. And then the third thing is you have to have trust in your training and faith in your people that they are going to come get you. If you have those 3, you can work through everything else over time, and that's the evader standpoint. So in the SEER phrase, the survival and evasion, of course, that's what everybody seems to focus on, and because that's hopefully where it ends. You survive, you evade, you get recovered. If you don't, of course, you're thinking about the resistance side and the escape side, which takes you into different arenas. But I think those are the 3 critical things. Those are the 3 things I've taught hundreds of air crews and ground crews about isolating incidents. Is no matter what happens, you've got to keep your head about you, and it's not easy. And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of folks had me on different shows and stuff like that. And they found out that I'd been a trainer in this. I'd been shot down myself before, so I kind of get a sense of what that's like. And a helicopter is a little bit different, but nevertheless, it still goes through your mind. And I've also been the guy who's worked in theater level staff work on this specific mission set and understand the greater architecture that is around the world for this. And so I was able to put all that together. And in the end, none of that matters. Is the great architecture that's around the PR world, the personal recovery world. If the evader doesn't have the mindset and the trust and the faith and the communications ability to go through what they need to go through to get recovered, and we will keep going no matter how long it takes to find a person. So if they don't have a radio, it's not like we're not looking.
Yeah, I don't think that we've had an evasion sequence once somebody's on the ground and they're having to evade until rescue or capture for more than a few hours in recent years, in the last decades or so. It might have been Vietnam was the last time we had a long-term evasion exercise happen that was more than 12 hours or so. And this one was 2 days, I think. About 48 hours or so.
From an aircrew perspective,
yeah, from an aircrew perspective. How do you think it went from that perspective, considering the age of this guy? He was hurt somehow, and those kind of things, and the terrain he had to deal with.
Well, again, given what we know, of course, or think we know, there is one measure of success. We always go back to that. A person is recovered, and we lost nobody. Lost a few things, but that's okay. Given the area that he was at, he probably went to a fairly appropriate place to try to hide, because if it's hard for him to get up those hills, it's hard for everybody else to get up them as well and find him. And we heard about the CIA talking about how they were able to identify him using some discrete skills and tools that they have. The real truth of this story, as far as the good things and the bad things, will of course come out. And much of it will probably never come out of the classified environment of the personnel recovery agencies that's working in Virginia, and it shouldn't. It shouldn't. It needs to stay there and be imparted to air crews with the appropriate need to know and classification levels to get it. But, I look at where he went down and look at the situation and all the things that could have gone wrong. And in the end, found a place to hide, went to high ground for communications, got identified, started the plan went based on that, and he was successfully recovered. This is the ultimate no plan survives first contact with the enemy.
Oh yeah.
And this is exactly why you need the most highly trained people doing the mission.
Yeah, and we got to take our last break. When we come back, I want to talk about that. No plan survives first contact with the enemy. That's a standard rule, folks. We'll be right back with Darren Gobb.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com.
As far as China is concerned, China can send their ships to us. China can send their ships to Venezuela. We told them, buy from Venezuela. We have a lot of overcapacity. We'd sell them, and we'll probably sell it for even less money. I have a very good relationship with President Xi of China, and we work together very well. They're paying us substantial money, as you know. We've never got money before. I listened to this Gordon Chang. He has no idea what he's talking about. We have been very tough on China. Tough but fair. And, it's an amazing place. But I have a very good relationship with China, and they've been during my, I put tremendous tariffs. I put 100% tariff on all Chinese cars coming in, and that's destroying Europe. They're destroying Europe because they're taking away so much business from Mercedes and BMW, etc. And we don't have any Chinese cars in our country because they would have destroyed General Motors, Ford. They would have destroyed these companies if they did it. So I put 100% tariff on, and in all fairness to Biden, he allowed it to stay on, which is shocking to me.
Right.
It's one of the things, it's about the only thing he did good, but he allowed it to stay. So we don't have the problem that they have. With that.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and we're talking about what's going on with Iran. China's a part of that. That's why I wanted to play that clip. But from the context of the amazing rescue of the two downed F-15E aircrew members that we pulled off, there's a lot of story to be talked about that should be known, and a lot more that should never be known, except for to the air crews and other types of service members that have to have the training called SIRI training that preps them to do things like survive and evade until they can be rescued, or what to do once they're captured, and how to escape from that capture and those kinds of things. And my guest today is retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel and helicopter pilot Darren Gobb, who is really an expert in this field and has done loads of more work than anybody else I've ever run into from an aviator perspective and from a overall planning perspective, even up the upper operational and strategic echelons. There aren't a lot of folks that have this level of expertise. And Darren, I just want to talk for a minute about we think, it's been reported that maybe it was Chinese Manpad, a man-launched surface-to-air missile that had been shipped in that might have gotten these guys. I surmise it was probably some kind of Manpad. Heck, it could be a Stinger that was given to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, for all we know. I had one of those fired at me in Afghanistan, as a matter of fact. But the Chinese are heavily involved in this. As a matter of fact, I think that it's just Rob's gut check, being in a non-classified environment for these last few years, that from a strategic perspective, a lot of the messaging is aimed at the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Armed Forces, the PLA out there, about their gear that they sold to Iran, about our capability and what they don't know that's left about our capability that we haven't advertised in this operation, and about their limitations from a strategic perspective. And I think this rescue goes into that too, because their radars are supposed to be these huge anti-stealth radars, which means they're really good at picking up everything else. And we just flew big Hercs and Blackhawks and some other smaller prop aircraft in there, and nobody even knew we were there. So the Chinese have got to be shaking their heads, going, "What else do we don't know?"
Yeah, just to say the least, because as you know as well as I do, that anytime we advertise something and show it in public, there's always something else back there that's even better, and we don't always we can't show that either. So having a little bit of that vagueness is a powerful tool. But there's a message. There's so many messages going out right now, just through observation, and we talk about Iran and its proxies. Hezbollah, Houthis, and Hamas, right? And two of those are essentially non-effective or gone. One of them is left, and we'll see how long that lasts. But not many people talk about the fact that Iran is a proxy vassal nation itself, and that it's primarily to China and to Russia. That's a two-way street for sure. Energy leaving Iran, China, and drones leaving Iran and going to Russia. Exchange of technologies and capabilities. China is sweeping the airwaves for electronics. Russia is helping with targeting. We know these things to be true. And we can't say much because, well, where have we been in Ukraine, right? Helping out of Germany. So there's a couple other messages here, though, that are extraordinarily important from an economic standpoint, not just military readiness. We've demonstrated our dominance over their systems quite readily, because what's the difference between China's systems and Russia's systems? Very little in the end. But by way of Venezuela and Iran, we now have a chokehold on much of the energy that supplies China's manufacturing industry. And they were already in some dire straits with their economy in the first place. And now we've just swept along 15% or so of their oil imports, which doesn't sound like much until 15% is gone. And that's a huge hit. So there's a lot that, besides that, I mean, Iran is a linchpin to the Belt and Road Initiative of China, trying to lace together countries and create this important economic alliance, as well as trying to build the BRICS currency system around that as also. So what's happening now? Well, those ships that were trying to go to Iran, where are they at now? Well, they're moving their way to Galveston, Texas. And for one example, what does that do? That creates the value and shows the resurgence of the petrodollar and our dominance on the economic front as well. You don't have an economy, you don't have a military. And that's what China is highly concerned about right now, despite their internal political dynamics. And then there's Russia, who's solely focused on Ukraine, suddenly lost its Shahid drone manufacturing supply line. Of course, that war's going on. Who knows how long it will go on, at what scale. But there is, I mean, really, if you snap a thread that starts in Tehran and watch the different parts and pieces where it goes, everything from Hezbollah, not only in Lebanon, to the islands north of Venezuela. I mean, I think people are underestimating what Iran means and why it is an industrial scale exporter of terrorism, financial incentives, and all the bad things around the world. They're working with cartels. And when you're working with cartels in Mexico, what are you then doing also? Well, these cartels are implanted on reservations throughout many of the states in the United States. We got 6 major reservations in Montana. Who's on those reservations? Cartel members, Sinaloa cartel members, because they can operate freely. So to think that Iran is a war of choice I think is foolish. In
Yeah.
fact, I think we're trying to finish a war that's been waged against us for 4+ decades. It's not going to be perfect. We mentioned it, right? The enemy gets a vote.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
to ignore this conflict is folly.
Yeah, the enemy always gets a vote. And I think the way you described it is the reason why this operation has to be, and it has to continue to be, an industrial scale air and naval campaign backed up by destabilizing on the ground and giving space for the resistance there to be able to rise up and getting some arms capability in their hands to do that. And this blockade, cutting their economic lifeline off so they can't pay their people. That's a key thing. I don't think a lot of people really understand. It's that simple and low level that when you can't pay your people and they can't pay their bills and feed their families and those kind of things, and the certainty of that pay gets destroyed. That's the key, is the certainty of that pay getting destroyed for a long-term period of time. That's the piece that I think that's missing so far. But I don't see any of these developments as losses to the United States and Israel's war effort here. As a matter of fact, I see the way they're being handled as actually buttressing our objectives and our ability to get to our objectives. But there's a lot of people, even on my side of the aisle, that are saying, we've lost, it's a strategic loss. The Iranians are going to win, and they're going to have nukes in a couple of years, and then you're going to see hyperinflation and those kind of things. I mean, I don't get the sense that you're there on that.
No, and I think it's because there's very few people in America who actually think strategically, meaning specifically the calendar. You've got to have some patience to let some things play out. And are we going to screw some things up? Of course we are. That's the nature of conflict, and you have to expect that. But then you say, okay, we screwed it up. What do we do now? Well, you do something now to help fix it or overcome it, and keep going. And that's what really many of these, what they're watching in Iran right now is just the next phases of operations getting put together, in some cases on the fly. But the Strait of Hormuz piece, that was not a surprise.
No,
that was expected. I mean, it's completely expected. But you can't deal with the Strait first when you have this beast to the east full of air defense, artillery systems, and missiles and drones and all of that. You got to deal with that first. You got to deal with the command and control structure. You can't go straight, literally, into the Strait and have that be your first objective, because you put everybody there at significant risk. You've got to take the greater theater risk down first. And then you start eating this elephant a little bit at a time instead of all at once. Of course, it won't be perfect. But when I saw that they were talking about blockading this and making sure that people can't get out, and I don't know, China's going to notice, India's going to notice, others are going to notice now and be like, oh boy. Well, that's exactly what I wanted to have happen. I didn't want to have Marines on Guard Island. So I'm like, okay, these are positive developments. Let's be patient and let it work out. If this was a Biden administration trying to do something like this, different equation. We saw what they can and can't do. But I would just ask Americans to be critical. That's fine. But think longer, think bigger, and be a little patient. And if something doesn't work out, that's just, the way warfare is. But I see a lot of good in the middle of all the noise.
I do too. So far, of course, the enemy always gets a vote. The Chinese are rumbling about their ships being stopped. The Turkish president's saying he's going to go after Israel. But I don't think any of that will ever come to fruition because of the situation and what we have demonstrated here. Well, Darren, thank you so much for coming on today and spending this much longer period of time with us than you get to do on those big shows, because it's important for people to be able to listen to an expert like you, and I appreciate it. Tell folks where they can find you and your work real quick before I let you go, man.
Well, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook. I got back on. They kicked me off. I just outweighted them. And then DarrenGobb.com. You can find some of my book stuff and my books on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. And I think that's probably the bulk of it.
All right,
I'm not
man.
hiding, that's for sure.
No, you're not. Well, thank you very much. Stay safe out there. Keep up the great work, my friend.
Thanks, you too, Rob.
All right, tomorrow's Training Tuesday. We'll see you then on the Rob Maness Show on World View Tube.